anything, you know, and they're the ones that I think they like.
Yeah.
They asked a question about, you know, remember that one question? We talked about Hammurabi, about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anybody know what that is? Anyway, I
Yeah.
knew it, and that set me off right there.
Yeah. You know something. Uh-oh.
Yeah, and that's why I think they didn't like.
Yeah. Then that's that. Well, that is part of it because they want you to, as much as you can, only rely on the information presented at trial.
Exactly.
And then what you start playing with is naivety and novelty. Like now you're giving people new information that they have no familiarity with. And how does that work? Well, that's not always the best.
And most of the questions were the same thing over and over again. They'd say, well, I might have to send this guy to prison. Do you think you could, you know, do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or.
Can you set aside your personal biases on this, that kind of thing? Did you ever hear that where it's like, can you set that aside and decide this case based on what you hear today?
Yeah. Yeah, but I got all that, but I think they thought, like you say, that I knew more about them, like.
Yeah.
Cause most people just said yes, no, they didn't really say anything, you know. I'm kind of stupid. If I know an answer to something, you know, maybe I'm trying to.
You will share, which is.
I say too much. I say too much.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because I don't know if I really would have wanted to sit in there for 4 days anyway. I mean, an hour in class is tough sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
But a whole day.
Oh, yeah.
In a courtroom when you can't say a word, that'd be hard for me to do.
Well, my favorite was whenever I got the opportunity to, like I said, no one took notes on anything. And that's the thing. It's like I don't understand that. You're gonna have a big decision coming up and you're not taking any information down. Ooh, that might be bad.
So I remember when you said that, and I took a pad with me, and I actually put it, I had a pair of answer boxes inside.
Typically, they'll provide it for you. If you get selected
Oh,
as a
really?
juror, they'll give you a pad, they'll give you, and it'll all just be up there ready for you. Kind of thing. So it's really cool. Let's see. So today.
So you went all the way through the trial and everything.
Oh yeah. We got in deliberations. It was one of those things that it was a lot of fun because people would address those gaps in their knowledge quite directly, and then it'd be like, okay, how did you come to this conclusion when you think that this person's innocent? And because in that one, it was literally, it could have been a case that would take all of like 15 minutes to really present. Yeah, because it was pretty straightforward. And yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, you got quite a few people.
Yeah, almost right here. I got one more. I think I'm on the lookout for. I'm gonna see if they pop in a minute. But yeah, the case that I had was a murder case. Basically what it was 2 brothers and their sister came home for Christmas. It was the day before Christmas Eve. They went bar hopping. And so it's older brother, older brother, sister, younger brother. Younger brother was a tiny guy, like probably about this tall, may have been like about 20. So tiny guy, good target. He'd been flashing money at the bars, kind of thing. Someone saw it. And we went out to the parking lot drunk. They pulled him off, and everybody else is drunk too, so was paying attention. Brother notices by the time he gets to the vehicle, takes off running to get his younger brother's getting his ass beat. 2 guys were beating his ass, proceed to let him go, turn around, take off running. One of them turns back around and decides, I'm still gonna shoot you in. Pop, shot the older brother in the stomach. He bleeds out internally. They had a positive ID from the younger brother. Of course, he was drinking. They had video recording of the vehicle, even seen that an eyewitness of the guy who saw someone get in the vehicle and leave, that an eyewitness of someone dropping off the vehicle somewhere else to abandon it. And they had a cigarette butt with DNA for the defendant, right? The defendant admitted to breaking into vehicles in the neighborhood where the vehicle was stolen about 15 to 20 minutes prior before it makes its way across town where it's seen in that video and used as a getaway vehicle in the murder. It's like, okay, you're in that vehicle long enough to smoke a cigarette. You place yourself in that vehicle. You have DNA in that vehicle. You've been there long enough to smoke a cigarette, right? You're in a window of 15 minutes to get that vehicle across town, and it takes at least 10. What's the likelihood 2 people broke into the same vehicle and used it? No, and you did this, right? And so I still had to talk with, and it wasn't just me, there was like about half of us. We're talking the other half of the people there about logic here, guys. Yes, you might feel bad that you convict this guy, and there's a potential that someone could have broken into that. But also, look, they've identified him. They've already gotten his roommate who had deals in illegal guns out of this house with this make and this type. They've gotten, and so when you lay it all, it's like open shut. Are we there yet? And still, we had one person tried to hold out based on race
Really?
reasons. Yes. And so it's like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. And if you do that, I'm gonna say something right out loud to everyone.
Yeah.
And
So
so,
that's what I think they
Yeah.
really thought I was gonna do, is
Yeah.
be the holdout or something.
yeah, they want a verdict. They do not want a
Yeah,
mistrial or a
yeah.
hung jury. Those are the only things that they want to avoid. They just want to be done.
Yeah, but all this guy was a 9-count deal. That was the thing. It wasn't like murder or anything, but it was like just, I thought it was a bunch of dumb stuff. It's like something with friends. He had some friends and he supposedly kidnapped one of them and got in a police case and ran through 2 roadblocks.
And what the
Had
person really
marijuana
had
in the car and had
Mhm.
sawed-off shotgun,
Oh.
just silly stuff, you know? And to me, it's like, well, that's pretty bad.
Mhm.
But 9 counts, so where do you leave off on?
Well,
Because I wasn't here Monday.
ooh, I need to post up that video. So last time was psychological theory, if I remember correctly. We talked about, the book talks about Freud, it talks about, trying to remember, I don't really remember the book. Remember I mentioned Freud, so I also talked a little bit about Jung, because that's one of the students. Piaget is more of an influence for me in terms of, interactions with people. He's really cool, because if I remember correctly, he's play. He studied minds, and that's where you get the 3-to-1 ratio whenever you play with somebody. And this is in conversations, this is any interactions with anybody. If you want to have a good interaction, keep communication going, and it's an unlevel playing field, it's 3-to-1. For anything that's negative, 3 positives, right? If you're dealing with playing, as in like wrestling, say I'm big and you're little. I'll win 3 times, I'll let you win once. If I let you win more than that, you'll know that I'm not actually playing, like I'm not actually putting up a fight. And so if you win too much, you'll know that. And if I win all the time, you won't like it because you lose all the time. And so there's a balance there. Everything has a balance. See, what else do we talk about in the psychological stuff? We talked about cognitive issues. That's gonna be processes involved that involve the biological side of something too. Like whenever you're doing memories alone. Think of yourself almost like a computer to some degree. There's a lot of information coming in. There's only so much we can handle. So that's our bandwidth. And then, so that bandwidth needs to be translated over into your short-term memory, and that gets even smaller. And then sometimes some of that stuff will make it over to your long-term memory. And then there's all the processes involved with us trying to roll around inside our minds to pull those things right back out of the box. And that's not easy. And so all those things have the ability to affect memories, affect understanding, affect everything. Best story I've ever heard about that cognitive side, that processing memories, it was actually a rape case. I can't remember the names of the parties involved, but it was a pretty big one many decades ago, because it highlighted that cognitive issue so well. A lady, she had been a victim to a stranger rape, which is not it's the uncommon. Complete stranger actually does the crime. Of course, get eyewitness right there. You don't get much better in terms of eyewitness, but also all of the things that are associated with that type of event, all of the pressures, all of the psychological issues, all of that. So your ability to process stuff's now been cleaved to where it's very, very, very little. So our ability to remember the person is very little. When you start going into the processes for lineup and suspect identification, what are the likelihoods that we can influence that? Very, very high. Particularly if you don't make an identification, you don't really remember because so much is going on. So I'm going to present series after series of lineups to you, whether here's a panel of 5 photos or whatever. As you see that, if you see it 3, 6, 12 times, you won't get 12, but you might see it like 2, 3, 5 times. How long does it take? Yeah, cool.
You gotta get it sorted back.
Yeah, I kind of like it. I dug around it. As you get exposed to those faces over and over and over again, I mean, there's everything about what we're attentive to and things we pay attention to, but we have that subconscious thing. Like how much stuff gets through that we don't realize and we won't know. And that's what you start dealing with there. So if I've shown you, we'll say 15 pictures and 3 of them of the same guy, at some point in time, you're going to start thinking, okay, I'm dealing with this issue. I'm trying to remember what this guy looks like. Okay, I have the picture in my mind and I have all these pictures I'm looking at and trying to compare those images to. At what point in time am I no longer seeing the picture from my mind, but it's the memory of the fact that I've been repeatedly exposed to this guy as I'm thinking about the stuff that's happening. And that's what happened with her. It was so bad that whenever DNA evidence finally cleared the guy, he'd spent, I forget how many years in prison. It found out there was a serial rapist who had been recently let out during that time frame. That's how she was attacked. He'd been back in prison, and when DNA became more available, we got a hit for this one, because we got the wrong guy. It was so bad that even after the fact, as she was trying to reconcile the fact that her memories were so flawed, she wrote the guy a letter, and that letter became public. And in it, she even acknowledged the fact that her nightly terrors, the dreams, the nightmares she'd have every single night, her attacker has his face, and he didn't do anything. Like that's pretty messed up, right? And that's just one of those aspects of how those things can develop in an actual person, but the overall process is that. And so it's complex. That's the cognitive side, you have the biological side, and you have all ways of process things and all the knowledge that's generated over the psychological field too. Psychology is more individual level. When you get over here, you start dealing with more aggregates. And so that's the big distinction there, why you might want to focus one area or the other. Really just depends on what you want to do and what kind of career you want to see yourselves in. If you want to be like the one-on-one, it's like you can stay here, you're just probably more likely to become a practitioner, right? Lots of options though. Let's see if this works. Yeah.
Yeah, it works better.
Yeah, social structure.
Social structure.
So that's where we start moving off. Okay, now we're no longer dealing with people, but we're dealing with groups of people. And sometimes I like to start with some of the philosophical stuff because it is interesting. Is the whole more than the sum of its parts? Question mark. That's the philosophical underpinning for this whole area. One of them, I should say, just one of them. This is the initial one. You'll find this one in actual philosophy. Yes, no, unknown. Everybody needs a sound off. If you're in there online in this chat or via sound, if you have the ability, sound off and let me know if you're a yes, no, or a question mark. Is the whole more than the sum of its parts? What do you think?
Yes.
I got one yes.
I was gonna say yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, 1, 2, 3. I need 2 more. We'll give it a second. Got a yes there. Excellent. One of the reasons why I like starting this way. This is overwhelmingly positive from a philosophical standpoint. There is not much better than that, right? We got some stuff. Yes, that's good. It's coming together. Yes. What do we have? Positivity. We actually do end up with more than some of its parts. And I can make that very, very clear in terms of if it's you plus me or anyone else, instead of it just being you, you now have a team, right? 1, 2, 3, you got more, right? And that's part of this, whether you're talking theory itself or anything. Let's try this a little bit. Well, you can see this. If anything pops up, I can move it over. You literally end up with not just everything you bring into it, you're able to capitalize off of both of you to do more. And as that team grows, your ability to do that increases. If you do it with your eyes on it. That doesn't always work that way, but in theory, this is what it should do. Why we ask that, because now we're always dealing with this. We'll take these into account, but they matter, I wouldn't say less. They're not what we're dealing with anymore. Now we've moved up a level. We are now a little bit more abstract, or you're dealing with literally levels of analysis whenever you get into the methodology side, because you have to, those are some things that you can make decisions on. Do I want to study it as individuals? Do I want to study it as a group? And how big do I want to make those groups be? Right? No. The social structure stuff, depending on what this book presents, because I'm kind of going through it as we're going through it. I know what I want to tell you, and what it tells you, I'm still kind of going through that. Some stuff I don't necessarily agree with. But there's a few different areas of theory that it will bring into. The first one, about as far as I looked in this book to see how far they got, and we'll go into much greater detail if you want, is this. It's going to be history. Social disorganization. theory. Have we talked about that in here? I've talked about it in a couple of other classes this semester. I can't remember if we talked about it in here. Does that sound familiar? No. Okay, good. Good. Okay, so this one. Sean McKay, you're talking the 1930s. 30s, 40s, 50s. I think those were the 3 decades that they focused in on. If I remember, it's been a few years since I've spent a lot of time going back and rereading it, but I'm reading that stuff. What do you need to know about this? Chicago. Okay, you're dealing with Chicago, you're dealing with late 1800s to early 1900s. One of the things that we need to identify is, I kind of liken this to conversation. You start talking about theory, because as you're delving into the research side, that's literally what you're doing is you're writing a paper. It's almost like a letter where you acknowledge the past and you're writing it for the future. You're engaging in conversation. As you do that, realize these people were doing the same thing, right? They'll get the most quotes because they're the ones that what they did had the greatest impact, but they're going to be built off the people who came before them. So they may acknowledge these people in the textbook book. They might not. It's like Parks and Burgess. That's going to be several years, maybe decades beforehand. That's going to be understood. When you're dealing with Chicago, if you've had a chance to be there, you'll know that it's a great big town, city, right off the lake. You got a lake here, got the rest of the city, and it goes up and around. And see, it's a great big swath of urban area. Great big mess. Boy, is it. In this time, most of our travel was not very easy, right? You're talking about automobiles are relatively new. Yeah, so most people are not going to have those. Cities grow differently. If you're interested in other areas that are outside of criminal justice, where you use the same tenets, this is where you start getting into that. You can get into it in terms of architecture, in terms of city planning, those types of things. Because this, to some degree, you start dealing with city planning. What happened in this time frame is you have all of the things you learned about in history. Ecological pressures that would send people into immigration status, right? Think Irish potato famine, right? Real pressures that cause people to move around, almost like pressures that are going on. Yeah, this is something that always happens, always taking place. Worked in Chicago was you have the pier. The pier, right off the piers where people are coming in, you have the industrial district. That's where all your manufacturing is. You have to bring all this big heavy stuff off the boat. I want to get back on the boat as quickly as possible because that stuff's heavy and hard to move. Okay. People are coming in, they're low skills. It's really easy to put them in dangerous jobs where we don't really care what happens to them. There's a lot of political stuff involved with that. If you delve into it, you'll see that this whole process was inherently politically corrupt, and you'd have government officials who are literally funding immigrants into certain areas and telling them how to vote. Almost sounds vaguely familiar of things going on in the world today. Nothing changes. Yes. But here's what they found when they started analyzing. This is where you get the cool stuff. Parks and Burgess, as they analyzed what they started looking at is, okay, if we look at crime, and as I'm looking at that, what I see is a lot of crime right in this area. If I kind of do a bandwidth around it, catch a little bit more, and another bandwidth. But in these bandwidths that cover about the same size of areas, I notice that these crime rates change drastically. The closer I am to here, the more crime there is, and the further out that I move, it decreases. Since they're dealing with several decades worth of information, they actually track these people across generations. So they can literally see how their lives transform. You come in as an immigrant, within a generation, you figure out what the hell's going on here and how to navigate life. And at that point in time, if you can get out of here, you can as quickly as you can get better resources, right? At least you stop offending because you figured out a way to not get involved with that crap show, because it is. And I can tell you some stories about that. That's kind of fun, right? And so within a generation, the population that's in this area stops committing crime, and the ones that can move out to areas where there's less crime to begin with, right? Also, you have a new immigration wave come in. New population comes in that refuels this whole process. And so what you get is, I don't remember seeing this in the book, but I kind of thumbed through it pretty fast. What they do in this one is they propose a three-step process: invasion, succession, and dominance. Right? Invade, new wave comes in. Right? As they're coming in, this is that time period. Whenever they become the controlling majority of an area, that's succession. You are no longer minority, you're majority, you're in control. That's a different theory. Like that, if you really focus in on that element, we move into a different theory. This is, in terms of time, one of the predecessors to a lot of theories. If you add in that time element and you're the big population over a period of time, that stability is dominance. Now you have the ability to change the system, right? That's the process that takes place. There's something about cultural assimilation or something involved in this process that dissuades people from crime. But when you come in and you have this level of disorganization, it breeds it. It literally breeds it itself, is what they're saying. Parks and Burgess, they were the ones that identified this, the zonal hypothesis. You'll see it, they'll call it concentric zonal hypothesis. That was them. They took it a step further and analyzed it over time to see, hey, this pattern is one that's stable, but there are some important changes, right? It's almost like they're outlining a way to go about analyzing something you don't understand for stuff that's going on right now. It'll be very, very useful, right? Yeah. That's social disorganization theory. Where it goes from there is a great number of directions, depending on how much you want to get into it and what you want to do. What you can see from this, give you an idea. Probably my favorite article that I've seen after this is by a guy by the name of Bursick. Bob Bursick. Robert Bursick. And the one that really stands out for me was one that was from like the 1980s, and I say that. What he did is he took the same setup that they did, and rather than looking at, okay, we've got X number of people in this group, X number of people in this group, X number of people in this group. And we're also looking at juveniles because the juveniles want to permit crime. So they're really focusing on juvenile. Originally, more widely applied, but it starts out with juveniles. Okay. I can see that this class of juveniles, just this class of juveniles, they've got, we'll say it's 40, 20, and then we'll say 35 and 5, X, whatever groups you want to put there. You could do races, you could do cultures, you could do any classification, really, but typically, you know, those are the ones that they're looking at here, were juveniles and their ages kind of thing. But, okay, the next wave, I'll check to see, okay, maybe this one's 35, this one's 20, this one's 35, this one's 10, right? I can analyze those numbers directly. That's what they did. This guy, what he did is he pulled down, okay, I'm gonna look at the changes. So this one had a -5, this one had 0, it's not 0, it's not a +5. And now I'm analyzing whether the change itself is what's driving this, and not just the fact that we have this level of people in there, right? Small refinements, small logical refinements over time. Takes a great deal of thought to think about it in this way, because this is not the way we typically think about things. But if you start adding these things together logically, you can build into something that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to pull out. Where you do the same thing already. Ever have somebody lie to you? Sure you have. How do you figure out whether they're lying to you or not? You start comparing multiple sets of information to see if those things align. You do it logically, you come about with conclusions that you weren't given because that information was purposely withheld. Same processes, guys. You can be a detective now. Hey. Initial thoughts with social disorganization. Let's see what they said in this thing. We'll go ahead and share screen. So I don't remember what the.
So this is a cycle that keeps repeating and repeating.
Oh, yeah, and in terms of theories,
And
yeah.
they just keep writing it down and keep dead on it, keep it dead on it.
Oh, yeah, never, these things, they're always active. And that's probably the best way to look at it everything, I think there's a movie, I've not seen it, but the title sticks out to me because it's a good title. Everything, everywhere, all at once at the same time. That's everything. Like all the theories we learn about in these classes, all the different perspectives. If you deal with any one individual, it's going to be all of these things. It's not just going to be the fact that they're dealing with some level of disorganization. On the other side, they'll start talking about social control. Okay, so it's not just that you're disorganized. You're not attached to churches and schools or other things that give you that sense of structure. It's not just going to be that. It's going to be labeling. Since you're not involved in those things, they've labeled you as a deviant. It's not just going to be the fact that you're labeled as a deviant. Some of the things you're doing are different than the normal. And because you're doing that, you're hanging out with people who are doing things that are different than normal. It shifts you off into the next, and then that's learning. So all these things run all at the same time. It's just to analyze it and understand what's actually going on. We've got to focus. And it's really, really hard to do that. Incredibly hard. And that's why you end up with this whole field. But
So what did the automobile do to that? Because the automobile probably changed quite a bit. I mean, that's probably getting off the
Yeah.
somewhere.
no, that's a good question, because that's exactly where this goes next. We don't do this anymore. We build along streets, right? And so now what you see is, instead of this, what you'll see are cities develop like this. Major freeway, and so the city will build out in lines around them like that, kind of thing. You can see that on the. So instead of it building in a circle, it builds out along those lines, right? And so that's one of the reasons why you might have run into let's go. We split off and head towards Miami. It used to be called the Y. What is it now?
No, it's a,
One of those damn things.
yeah, it's a
Roundabout.
rotary or.
Yeah, roundabouts. Yeah,
Roundabout.
hate those things. Boy, do I hate those things. And I'm really, really curious to see in about 5 to 10 years' times what that did for automobile accidents in that area, right? Because
They got that from the east.
Yeah.
Like I say, you go to New York and.
yeah, they got that stuff from
Boston,
Europe.
you see those all over.
Yeah, they start bringing that in from Europe because Europe's got a different culture and they think that that's a better one. Maybe I don't know. But yeah, so you get those roundabouts things. That's why they're doing that. So they're trying to affect the city to some degree. It will have an effect on this to some degree. And if they do it right, ideally what you end up with is a tighter knit community. If you don't, what you end up with is people are pissed off as car accidents.
So have they had more accidents that they?
I don't know yet. And it's one of those things, I'll wait probably 5 to 10 years before I even try to look. Because
Yeah.
I want enough information to be like, well, look, right here, you screwed up. You know, it's like,
So is that part, is that considered social disorganization? They do that?
well, for them, it'd be more of like an assessment type of thing. When we get into methods, you know, that they start talking a little bit, all the different areas that they can apply that. That's the big one for them is, you know, that assessment of what they did it actually work kind of thing. And just like with the court process, it's really easy to say that something didn't work after the fact. You know, the figuring out in the moment is the hard part. And so you wait, you figure it out after the fact, and okay, this is the lesson we learned, move forward with that lesson. But yeah, so it's like that. Another thing that they'll do to affect crime, like this is the crime prevention side of things, is okay, your normal street network is a grid. If you're in Chicago, it's literally a grid. They'll put out the coordinates on each of the road signs, so you never get lost. But let's say I'm having an issue with crime in my neighborhood, and it's a big area, and my neighborhood's only this area. So what I'll do is, rather than dealing with this, is maybe I'll get rid of this road here. I'm gonna get rid of maybe a road over here, and I'll make it more difficult to get in here. And so if I'm not familiar with this, and maybe if I've got a lot of money, I'll change the actual structure to it some of this. Now, instead of being a grid, I'm gonna have something to do like this. And then I'll have a few roads that come in here and just kind of dead off somewhere else. You know, that don't make a whole lot of sense, because if it doesn't make much sense, if you're not familiar with the area, when you go into commit crime, you can't get out. You will hate that if you're trying to flee. Right? And so I know that you're looking at this. I'm going to change this. And so that's where we start getting into city planning and how these things overlap. So there's a lot. Okay, parts and dispersal. Okay, check. Here they'll talk about social structure, stratified societies and social classes. Okay. So when we start talking social structure, there are a lot of things to talk about. Basically, it's the convention through which we group people, we group things in general. The big one's gonna be social disorganization theory. The different ways we look at it vary a good degree, and depending on how the book sets it up, there are a few theories that they might put in a couple different sections, because you deal with disorganization, control, conflict, and marks. Those are all here. At stratified society, we have economics, social classes, all the things that they mentioned there. All those groups are not going to be equal in anything, really. If you find that they're equal in anything, that's actually pretty uncommon. People are different. Social class, if they start talking about that, you're really talking about socioeconomic status. That's a whole lot of things. When you start delving into that, you mentioned that earlier in the semester. That's gonna be things like education, income, where people place you in society, your esteem, all that stuff. This, for social classes, share a similar segment of economic attitudes, economic level, attitudes, values, norms, lifestyle. That's one way of looking at it. But social class is one way you can break these things up. When you start dealing with Marxism. SES. If it moves into the liberal theories, feminist theories, anything like that, or some of the racial ones, basically start dealing with, is it gonna be a race? Is it a sex-based thing? We start dealing with power dynamics. Really what you're talking about is these things are vehicles for power. Right? Here is this just straight disorganization. Control, it's about actual attachment. And then conflict is about, to some degree, but basically misunderstanding. That's kind of a generalized thing. We'll see what they can tell you, and I'll tell you more. Okay, problems with lower class, poverty, treatment, those kinds of things. Realize that it took all human history to get to the point where we decide that we're going to treat people equally, just independent of who they actually are. That was less than 1,000 years ago. People have been around for 100,000. That's big, right? The effects of socioeconomic status are massive. They'd be like, oh, I don't know if I need to say any of that stuff. Poverty, less likely to achieve, more likely to drop out. You'll suffer health problems. It affects you at every level. Minority groups and social structure. Minority groups, again, you'll have this unequal distribution of resources. We'll deal with philosophical first. When we start talking about equal distribution of resources, do we want an equal distribution of resources across any group as a general rule? Yes or no? That's a hard question to ask because it's not one we ever addressed directly like this. I'm going to ask it like this. Should we distribute resources equally across groups? Give me a yes or give me a no. And then I'll stop this so I can see you guys in the chat. Stop it. Okay, so give me.
I would say in theory, yes, but in reality, it's no, so I say yes.
Theory.
Reality, yeah.
I'm gonna say no.
You got a no. Good. Any others? Got another no. It's a hard one. This is a hard one because it's one that can, like we said, theoretically, yeah, it's like heaven's a beautiful place. I say that a lot whenever I start talking about theory because it's like, man, people spend a lot of time thinking about stuff like that, and I ain't never seen it. I've seen some things that get close though. Here. We're also talking about discrimination. Discrimination, I can spell, yay. People will inherently have a positive feeling towards this and a negative feeling towards this. Realize that they are the exact same thing and that there are positives and negatives of both, right? We do want discrimination to some degree, right? I can point in different domains. My favorite one is in terms of war. If I'm going to be dealing with someone who is going to come at an attack in anywhere in my vicinity, I'm going to want them to be very, very much discriminatory, right? Whether that's in them selecting their targets or the means of their attack. For crime prevention, I'd say, okay? I'd rather someone have a gun than an explosive, right? Positive discrimination. Here, with this, those who perform differently should be able to, like with Marx, control what it is that they've created, right? That's an underlying premise that's sometimes missed. They get more focused on the power and control that they miss out what this thing does. We do not want an equal distribution because at that point in time, whatever it is, whoever's doing anything for it doesn't matter anymore. Right? If I'm doing all the work, but everything gets distributed equally, why am I doing the work? Very soon, there's no incentive to, and that's why if you look at countries that take that as a theory, as a principle, they fall apart because it just doesn't work.
Isn't that the communist theory, though?
It is.
Everybody gets equal.
It is.
But it's not true.
It does not work.
It's not,
No.
it's not true.
No, it doesn't
It's
work.
like capitalism versus communism.
Yeah, and exactly that. And sometimes, depending on whenever the book really gets in that, we'll talk about it right now. It's that balance thing. It's still that balancing. If you have one that's extremely unbalanced, whether it's communist or capitalist, they're the same thing. It's just, okay, who's controlling it? Is it the corporations or the government? And realize that they're the same people. And they're always going to be the same people because that's how those things develop. And it literally is. And so what you need a system that allows this to a degree and allows for this to a degree. And it's just figuring that out. We don't do that though. We pick a house, a side of the house, and we run with that, I guess. I don't like that. That's politics. That's why I'm not in that. Because I don't want to get into that. So that's what's going on with that one. So whenever you start coming across the theories that are based on Marx, keep that in mind. Keep in mind that the death count for Marx in the last 200 years is on the same scale as human war. Not an understatement. All human war, you're dealing with much smaller populations, yes. But we can deal with the actual numbers of people who died in war and versus those who died from communism itself is one of those things that if that ever comes up, I usually identify that. Between China, Russia alone, what is it, 150 million deaths, something like that? We don't know, right? We're off by tens of millions. And that's one of those things. It's like, when we start dealing with war, what are we dealing with? Hundreds of millions dead across all of human history. You also deal with the nature of those deaths, where in war, at least they're fighting. In communism, it's usually the most vulnerable being shoved into trains and left to die. But that's a different conversation for a different day. All right, share screen. Minority group poverty. Yes, white privilege benefits Caucasians over whites. Okay, privilege is a thing that you need to be very careful because you're dealing with groups here. Again, you say one class group privilege does not mean that privilege extends to people in that class. That'd be like me pointing out the number of people in prison right now, which has a greater number of blacks or whites. It's going to be whites because there's more, right? That means that those who are suffering at the hands of the system, you have a number here that's greater. You have disproportionality there. That's where you get into the nuance. BLM stuff, I mean, it's important, but for this and that. Social structure and crime. Yeah, disadvantaged economic class position as the primary cause for crime. That's the motivation there, is what they're saying. Yeah, you're gonna have many motivations all running all at the same time. And we're just trying to find out what works. Okay, you keep moving. Aristotle wrote, poverty is the parent of crime. Yes, so again, not really anything new there. We're just clarifying how it actually works. Okay, they broke it into social disorganization, strain, and cultural deviance. I didn't talk about strain.
That's, for Aristotle to say that back then, that was pretty, you had to put a lot of thinking into that.
Oh my God, yeah.
Just think about Greece, it's how much has changed since then.
Oh, yeah, and well, that's the thing, it's like, what we do as a people and its importance is not to be understated. Dark ages kind of thing, it's like, you don't realize how easy those things are to kick off, it's just one failed generation. It's literally all it takes, and, if you look at indoor plumbing and how long we've had it, and the fact that it was back in that time frame, we've got about a 3,000 year gap. Imagine how far we'd be if we had 3,000 years of advancement from where we're at right now without any gaps. Jesus. That's one of those things. It's like, that's a scary proposition for what we could be doing, and we're not right now because we can't get our hands out of the mud, I guess. So social disorganization theory, I've already started to explain that one to you. Strain theory is that from a singular line, what I would say is that people who are experiencing strain, what it is that they have some type of goal that they seek to achieve, but they lack the means to get it. Theorists in that area, what they will do is they'll describe the different ways to address that strain theory. Typically, what you're dealing with there is the same issue with resources, same issue with opportunity. Strain. Goal. Means positive, negative, positive, negative. You get the goal. Yeah, good for you. That's called conventional. You go by modern convention, you're actually successful. Right here. You're following the means, but you're not acquiring those goals. Okay. Meaning you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're not getting there. If you don't get anything out of it. Basically start doing what you're doing is ritualism, right? You're doing it because society tells you need to do it, but it's not really doing anything good for you. You just feel better because you're doing it, right? Here, you have that goal, you don't have the means. This is one of the big areas for strain in terms of how we deal with that is, well, crime. Maybe crime can come in here too. This is strain to be anywhere where you have. Actually, let's take that back. This one's innovation. Innovation. This one's strain. The actual strain is where you have both no means and this noxious stimulus, right? Innovation is you still have that goal. You're going to acquire that goal, whether it's money. You're just going to seek new means. Drug trafficking, right? You found a new way. You've at least found a way to get aware to address that strain from not being able to get your goal. Let's see what they say. Okay, social disorganization theory. This has to do with transience, changing of neighborhoods. Yes, we already talked about that. Concentric zones, that's actually not Sean McKay. There you go. They do that, but that's not them. That's built off of Parks and Burgess. Copyright 1929 Chicago. Oh, if you want copies of that, you can find those online. I've got one that's got a few chapters that I've got. If you want to read these original writings from any of the authors that they mentioned, let me know and I'll see if I've got them. Most of them I do. Okay. That's a question. It's a good one for how this theory is going to affect life moving forward. If you start looking at how technology affects these things, basically you have more interactions with people and less actual physical interaction. Okay.
That shows you how much that's gonna change as far as
Mm-hmm.
from area into a phone. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Crime is gonna change.
Oh, yeah. So
It
crime,
already has.
yeah, crime will go
It's
technological.
now that this organization is on your cell phone.
Okay. And here's the next one, which really gets you going. Okay. So if the day we dealt with real physical tangible crime back in the day was we had solid communities that addressed it, and now we have areas that that's what I've heard bedroom communities. You go to work, you come home, you crash out, you don't talk to your neighbors, kind of thing. Okay. when that crime starts to come back in those areas, you now no longer have that community network you used to be able to levy against it. So you have areas that are vulnerable now more than ever because they let those social ties die. Right? And that's what's going to be the next thing. Moving on from there, disorganization theory. Here they start talking about all the different areas that it starts to, well, different areas you can focus in on or different aspects of it.
Chicago's always been a strange place. Did you see
Yes.
it from around Chicago somewhere?
We're from Central Illinois. My dad lived in Chicago for a few years. I lived there for a few months in total. It was a culture shock coming from rural area to, yeah, everybody's here, and this is really weird. So here's where they start talking about, okay, collective efficacy is one of those elements of the theory of social disorganization. So like the vehicle almost that allows for an area to fight against those social disorganization is that network, that community. How we measure that is collective efficacy. How effective are you as a collective to bind together, or depending on how you measure it, affect an actual change? So if you're actually doing this in terms of crime prevention and actively researching it, trying to make that change, what you do is you'd start to improve this, and then you wait to see what effects that has on crime. Right? Here's where it starts to talk about control theory. That's its own theory. It is seen as on a continuum with social disorganization theory because they are related. It is its own theory, though. And if this is the aspect that is more interesting to you, basically what you start dealing with here is your attachment to these institutions. Okay. Here we go. Gives you a nice little breakdown. Sean McKay, social disorganization, then it goes into social ecology theory. Basically what it is it's I don't want to say mashed together, compendium of a lot of different areas where they're applying the same theory, right? We're talking urban social life, fear, all those different areas, all those different topics you can focus in on. Strain theory. Rebellion is what this call this one. Could also be retreatism. Right? So here's conformity, here's ritualism. If you get the goal, but you're not using the proper means, that's innovation. That could be criminology. Rebellion, you no longer want to use the means to get the goals, you no longer want the dang means, right? That's rebellion. That's also crime. Retreatism, that's a little bit more like drug use, right? You're no longer going to make those goals that should be upheld by society. You feel the strain associated with not being able to make it, and as a way to address it, rather than finding a path, run away.
Just give up.
Yeah. Hopelessness is the worst.
Hopeless,
Yeah, hopelessness is the worst. I'll take rebellion any day. I can use that. Right? I just that you can re-aim. This is someone who wants to work. Make a good argument, you can re-aim that one. Retreatism, no. That's a bear. That's a hell of a one. Anomie. When I start talking about anomie, the animation of anomie, basically what they're talking about is the precursors to all of these theories start in the sociological side with a guy by the name of Durkheim. Emil Durkheim. You've heard of him before. You may not have focused on what he did. So this guy's Industrial Revolution era. Does a lot of writings. His most influential one, or just the one I remember the most, was on suicides. He's got a few different books, but the suicide stuff's the one that sticks out to me because that's where he really starts to break into what enemy is. Enemy. Latin, nomos, without law. Basically what would happen.
Without loss, is that what you?
Without law.
Without law. Oh.
Yeah. Unattached. in the Industrial Revolution, as society changed, people left the fields, they went to the cities. You no longer have a culture at all. As a result, the male workers started offing themselves. Yeah. And so trying to figure out why that was happening, you start building in the correlates, the precursors to social structures and their influence. Right. So that's anomos, that unattachment kind of thing. Whether it's because of this strain, whether it's because of social disorganization, whether it's because of your place in society, that's the big bear. Right. That's the one we want to really, you're one we're addressing. Here, that's where they start to address the middle class measuring rod. That's the thing that everyone's going for. Everyone wants to live a good life. But we'll pick up there next time. Cool?
Yep.
All right. Do we feel like we're cooking with gas?
I might not be able to do that here pretty soon.
Yeah, that's true.
Changing what they want, they don't want you to use a gas stove.
Yeah, gonna go electric.
I don't know, I like gas better, but when you live out in the country, electric's easier though. You gotta have propane running and all that.
That's true. That's very true. All right, guys, well, we'll call it a day. I will see you on Monday. We'll probably sit down and work on paper stuff, because I know that's something that's probably on your guys' mind. Yeah, and I was originally planning on doing that today, but I ran out of time, so we figured we'll pick up the lessons.
I was thinking.
Well, I put my first bit of time towards my graduate students, because they stress out a lot when it comes to papers. And so they're up next for that, and then you guys are up after that one. So with that, I will catch you all next time. Have a great day.
Thanks, Dr. Hurst.
My pleasure. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.